Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Zarhan, Mum, Tonks chastised as Harry blushed and began sputtering a protestation. Andromeda simply chuckled at the pair. I know what you teenagers get up to. I was your age once. How do you think you got here when I was younger than you, Dora? It was Tonks' turn to blush, as she grimaced at the image of her parents doing what her and Harry had yet to. Ugh, there goes my appetite, she grumbled. Don't be such a prude, Nymphadora, Andromeda chuckled. Myself and your father have a very happy and loving relationship, and on that note we are leaving, Tonks announced. Are you sure you don't have another house I can stay in? She asked Harry as she pulled him from the room. Harry could only laugh at her mortification. Tonks led him through the house and up the stairs, into a room she had taken up residence in. Judging by the amount of clothing and other items strewn around, she was in the process of unpacking. She mumbled unhappily under her breath as she pushed a pile of clothes onto the floor. I hate folding clothes. Harry grinned as he removed his wand and flicked it in the direction of the discarded mound, folding it nightly with minimal effort into arranged piles of trousers, tops and undergarments. Show off, she muttered. It's not difficult, Harry returned, reining in another bout of laughter. I can't do household charms, Tonks admitted with a shrug. I've never been good at them. Drives Mum mad. Cassie made me learn them, Harry explained. She said she was tired of cleaning up after me and that it was about time I started doing it for myself. She made me spend a week in my room practicing them when I was 11. Tonks grimaced at the thought. Her mother had not taken that step with her. Looks like I have no reason to start learning them now, she sighed, stretching and resting her legs across his lap. Harry quirked an eyebrow in her direction, and she smiled innocently at him. He held her gaze for a moment before shaking his head in amusement. Tonks had certainly shown her displeasure towards anything resembling domestic bliss. He vividly remembered the one time she had tried to cook for them both. He'd returned to her room after a long day of training to find her disheveled, a pungent aroma of burning food and a set of pans that were completely ruined. Tonks had been sat on the sofa, her countenance suggesting she had endured a traumatic experience. She hadn't tried cooking anything since, and Harry couldn't help but think her avoiding the kitchen was a good idea. He let out a sigh. The reason for him coming here wasn't as innocent as he'd intended. He was about to undertake something potentially very dangerous, and he had promised he would tell her when he planned to do such a thing. What is it? She questioned. Noticing his change of demeanor, Harry released a deep breath as he shrugged. Myself and my grandfather are going on an outing tonight, he began wearily. He thinks he has found something that is important to putting an end to Voldemort, and we are going to retrieve it. Tonks nodded as she worried her lip. Is it going to get you killed? Harry shook his head. Unlikely, but it's probably going to be dangerous. I just wanted to let you know. She gave him a sad smile. Just be careful. She knew there was nothing she could do to deter him from the path he had chosen. He was stubborn to a fault, but that was one of the things she admired about him. For one so young, he certainly didn't waver because of the words or disapproval of others. I will be, he promised as he placed a kiss on her brow. Arcturus entered the room he had chosen to keep Barty Crouch Jr. captive, the smell of urine and feces assaulting his senses, wrinkling his nose in distaste. In many ways, finding yourself a prisoner of the Blacks was much worse than what Azkaban had to offer. Of course, a Dementor or two wouldn't go amiss to ensure maximal misery, but Arcturus had other ways to crush the human spirit, and he was not subject to the same rules and regulations as those that guarded the island fortress. Here, he was the judge, the jury and the executioner by his design. Conditions were as good as he decided they would be, and as bad as what he felt was justified. Crouch deserved none of the former. He had provoked the patriarch of the Black family in ways that were unforgivable, and for his transgressions he would pay in blood at the very least. The man trembled in his chair, absent of his clothes, and limbs chained to keep him in place. He had purposely chilled the room to be deeply uncomfortable, nothing that would cause permanent damage, but as a constant reminder to Crouch that he was held at the pleasure of Arcturus Orion Black. He let out a whimper, the cold doing little for the welts, cuts, and broken bones that had been administered to him at the hands of his gaoler, who was smirking at the pitiful figure he presented. "Wakey, wakey, Crouch!" Arcturus jeered as he sprayed the man with icy water from his wand, rousing him into clarity. The glare he received in return was baleful, and Arcturus simply grinned in response. "My master will kill you, Black," Crouch spat. Arcturus closed the distance between the pair in 2 steps, and seized the man by the hair roughly. "Your master's days are numbered, you little shit. He picked the wrong family to mess with this time. Even as we speak, my heir lives and breathes, and sent the man whose ass you pucker up for into hiding and licking his wounds," he growled. "You are very much mistaken if it us that need fear the half-blood bastard. He should fear what Harry will do to him," he whispered before driving his fist into Barty's stomach. Crouch wheezed as the air was driven from his lungs, the already broken ribs causing him to wince at the force behind the blow. He coughed and his mouth filled with taste of iron. "I won't tell you anything," he declared breathlessly. Arcturus smirked as he shrugged off his robes and rolled up the sleeves of his shirt. He had expected as much, had even looked forward to the defiance. He wanted to break the man's will, have him begging for mercy as he cleared his conscience of all the information he held. Then and only then would he be satisfied. He could get what he wanted through Veritas Serum, but there was little joy to be had in that. No, such a tactic would not do. He wanted the man to suffer so much that he became pliable to his will, prostrated himself before him and pleaded for mercy. He would get none here. All that awaited Barty Crouch Jr. was pain beyond pain, and the easing of his own mind as he relieved himself of what the other man wanted. "Have it your way," Arcturus shrugged as he leveled his wand at the man. Crucio. The first of many screams to follow was ripped from his throat as he thrashed against the chains that bound him, and even under the first onslaught he questioned how long he could endure this before he inevitably broke. Harry returned to Grimmauld Place early in the evening as the rest of the family was sitting down for dinner. Sirius appeared visibly pleased by his arrival, shooting a frustrated look towards each of the older blacks. The atmosphere between Cassiopeia and Arcturus had been frosty at best, the former still unwilling to accept the course of action her brother had taken with her apprentice, and failing to consult her on the matter. The latter was being himself, ignoring the burning glare of the woman. Cassie would get no apologies from the man, no matter how hard she tried to immolate him with her eyes. "Are you ready for our little venture?" Arcturus questioned as he took his seat to the right of him. Harry nodded as he took in the countenance of his grandfather. He was suspiciously pleased, his steely grey orbs unable to conceal either some mirth or victory. Whatever it was, the look adorning his features never boded well for another. "Is there anything else I need to know?" Arcturus answered in the negative, with a shake of his head. "The place is quiet. It doesn't look like anyone has been there for years. We should have all the time in the world. Unless we trigger an alert ward," Harry pointed out as he began tucking into a large piece of chicken. "I can imagine old Tom wouldn't be too happy to find us there." Arcturus smirked. "Wouldn't that just play into your hands if he did?" Harry's nostrils flared, his anger beginning to bubble under the surface of his skin. As much as he wanted this plan to succeed without hindrance, Tom arriving would be a gift he would not decline. "It would," he admitted, "but it isn't enough. Just killing him will not satisfy me. I want him to suffer every indignity possible before that comes." Arcturus nodded proudly. "Then finish up and meet me in the study. Bring anything you think we will need." "What about him?" Harry asked, jerking a finger in Sirius's direction. "It couldn't hurt." Arcturus mused aloud. "We leave in 15 minutes. The man left the room to make whatever preparations he deemed necessary, whilst Harry finished off his meal, his father staring at him questioningly. "I would like you there, just in case something goes wrong." Harry answered the unasked question. "It feels like we haven't spent much time together recently." Sirius smiled. His final statement was true. The pair had spent very little time together since the farce of the tournament came into their lives. He was happy that Harry was moving on in many ways, but he had missed the time he usually spent with the boy. It had made him begin to consider his own life. It wouldn't be long before he was no longer needed, as he once was. Harry would become the head of the family and Sirius would be left to stagnate. He hadn't raised his thoughts or worries. Harry had other things he needed to focus on, but it was a conversation they would need to be had in the future. Sirius just needed to work out what it was he wanted himself. They finished their meal in companionable silence and exited the room together, leaving Cassie to wallow in her own anger as they headed to where Arcturus was waiting for him. "Is there anything else you think we will need to take?" Sirius asked nervously. Harry could understand his disposition. His father had borne witness to more of what Tom had done during the previous war than himself and his grandfather combined. "We will be okay, Dad," he assured the man. "How can you be so casual about all of this?" Sirius pressed irritably. Harry paused and gave the man a smile. "Because I'll have you with me." The confident words warmed his heart. It had felt like a lifetime had passed since he'd felt needed by Harry. He shook himself from his thoughts and followed his son, who had continued on his way without Sirius being aware. Harry knocked on the door to the study and entered, finding Arcturus sat behind the desk, lost in his thoughts. "Are you ready?" Harry called, pulling the man from his stupor. "It is you that needs to be ready," Arcturus returned as he pushed himself to his feet. "We will be there to watch over you, but it will be down to you to bring down the wards." Harry frowned. It was becoming a common occurrence for Arcturus to take a more supporting role in things they did together. He pushed those thoughts aside. It certainly was not the time to dwell on them. He needed to focus on the task at hand. "Where is it we are heading?" "Little Hangleton," Arcturus announced, "to what remains of the once great house of Gaunt." With the destination given, he disappeared with a gentle pop. Returning to the village his brother had been murdered in was not an experience he was looking forward to. If he had his way, he would never darken the streets of the place with his shadow again. However, Arcturus was convinced it was a necessity and he would not shirk his responsibilities, because it may provoke an unfavorable response within him. "Let's get this over with," he sighed as he seized Sirius under one arm and disapparated, using the family ring to take him to where his grandfather had traveled to. Arriving, a familiar and unwelcome scent reached him from somewhere in the distance. Though unwelcome, it caused a slight satisfied smile to tug at his lips. It was the smell of burning, and the memory of Tom being trapped within his flames surfaced. "The house is this way," Arcturus interrupted his musings as he pointed towards the road that led away from the village. It was still early in the evening, but there were no people of which to speak on the streets. The small collection of properties they did pass were lively, and Harry suspected most would be sitting down to their own meals. It only made his task more the easier. It meant that he would not have to obviate any muggles that may happen upon them. The trio walked a considerable distance away from the dwellings, following the road that seemed to only lead further into the rural surroundings of the village. It was around 10 minutes into the walk that Harry paused, feeling a strong presence permeating the air from ahead. "What is it?" Sirius questioned, drawing his wand protectively. "Wards," Harry muttered as he frowned, carefully continuing towards where he felt the magic. "You can feel it from here?" Harry nodded. "Tom's magic is familiar to me. It almost feels that there's something there trying to lure me towards it," he added as an afterthought. "Do you think we should be doing this?" Sirius asked, looking towards Arcturus worriedly. The older man nodded. "Continue, Harry." Harry proceeded towards where the magic was strongest, finding himself stood in front of a hedge. In the smallest of gaps he could see what appeared to be little more than a dilapidated shack on the other side. The ward line reached to a little in front of where he was, and he held up a hand to prevent Arcturus and Sirius from coming any closer. The magic was undoubtedly Tom's, but felt almost like his own in a way that made him uncomfortable. It was a feeling he knew well, a feeling that had resided within him ever since he had been cured as a boy. He'd always been able to feel the magic of the blacks, and even the Potters, both powerful and easily differentiated because of how dissimilar they were. There had always been something else within him, however, and what he felt in these wards was just that. He had always known there was something else about him, something that didn't belong, but something that had become as much a part of him as the magic of those that had sired him and those that had adopted him through blood. Once upon a time he found the presence of the other abhorrent, and the need to purge it from had been overwhelming. Such a thing, he learned, was not possible. Over the years it had assimilated itself, the other magics that belonged accepting it as part of them collectively. The relationship between the three had been volatile at first, each wishing to assert its will upon the other two. It left him struggling with practical work, thus his time spent in Ireland as a young boy. With time, whatever conflict within him had settled and the magics worked steadily in tandem with one another, making him all the stronger for it. He pulled himself from his thoughts and drew his wand, carefully aiming it in the direction of the wards. With only a few muttered phrases, he felt them begin to react unfavorably towards him. The magic began to wrap around him, blanketing him in a feeling of despair, suffocating, and pulling the air from his lungs. "Stop," he hissed angrily, slipping into parcel tongue. It was as though the magic had been caught in the act of something it should not be doing, as it froze, almost waiting to be given further instruction on how the situation would proceed. "Get off!" The pressure around him eased as the wards retreated, allowing him to breathe freely. He turned and faced Arcturus and Sirius, both returning his gaze with concern marring their features. He waved them off as he turned towards the wards and pointed his wand in the direction once again. He cast the same diagnostic charms, this time using the language that had been gifted to him, and the magic remained dormant, much to his relief. In only a few moments of work he found himself slightly disappointed, the ego of Tom knowing no bounds with how much he relied on his own use of parcel tongue to protect something of such importance. "It's done," he sighed after a final hiss, collapsing the scheme with a simple command. "That's it?" Arcturus questioned. Harry shrugged almost apologetically. "Tom is under the impression he's the only one left. Either that or he truly is so arrogant to the point of stupidity. If it benefits us, it doesn't matter," Arcturus dismissed. Harry could only shake his head as he carved a path through the neglected shrubbery and crossed onto the property, followed cautiously by his companions. He could feel nothing else in or around the garden, but the sense of foreboding stayed with him. Perhaps it was not only the wards protecting this place. Whatever else there was within the remains of the house itself, so that was where he proceeded, one still drawn and ready to be called upon if needed. "There's something in the house," he whispered, just loudly enough to be heard. "Do you know what it is?" Arcturus asked, placing an arm out to his side to prevent Sirius moving further forward. "I have an idea," Harry replied as he continued his approach towards the building. Whatever was in the house was calling to him as though he were an old friend, drawing him closer, with a gentle caressing across his very being. It was strong, convincing, and had Harry not put up his acclemency shields as tightly as possible, it may have succeeded in manipulating his senses. Even as the almost soothing touch of whatever dwelled within the house intensified to an almost uncomfortable vibrating, he held firm. He would not allow any construct of Tom get the better of him. Ensuring that the door had not been cursed or tampered with in any way, he drove his foot into it, splintering the wood and tearing it off its hinges with a single blow. A cloud of dust erupted from the floor, and Harry cast a bubblehead charm over himself to avoid breathing it in. It would not do to fall victim to such a simple thing as cursed particles. When everything settled, he steeled himself as he entered what remained of the house of Gaunt and teared almost in sympathy at the depravity the family had endured in its final years. The furniture had long ago rotted and gave off a musty smell matched only by the decaying wood, rusted fixtures, and collapsed roof in one corner of the living area. Time had not been kind to this place. Even with magic, little could be salvaged from here. "Have you found anything?" The voice of his grandfather interrupted his musings. Whatever was pulling him in was more prominent in the room, the feeling tainting him in an all too familiar way. For many years as a child, this feeling had clung to him, unable to be washed away. It was a dirty feeling, as though a stain that did not belong resided within him. This room permeated that very feeling, and the slightest bit that had scarred him, even after the incident in the Egyptian tomb, reared its head, calling to the familiar essence surrounding him. He swallowed deeply. He had long since pondered what had caused the issues with his magic as a boy. As he grew older, he knew it had to have been something so sinister that even his family would not discuss it with him. They had tried to pass it off as a simple magical malady, but he had found it hard to believe. No malady he had come across left any in such a state that he had been in, and he had checked every tome he could lay his hands on, even the most obscure in the family library. It was when he had been 14 that he stumbled upon what he once was whilst perusing a work titled Secrets of the Darkest Art. He had been looking for any mention of the spells he had knowledge of without ever having learned or come across them when his attention was grabbed by a section headed as on Horcruxes. It was as though something resonated within him. When he read the word Horcrux, and he was compelled to read it, he was certain he had heard it somewhere, but his memory failed him. Instead of dwelling on it, he decided to keep reading to see if the explanation would jog his memory. It did, though not in a way he had been expecting. The more he read, the more a picture began to form in his mind until a scene unfolded before him. A scene he witnessed when he was but a toddler. He vividly remembered the man clad in a dark cloak, his pale skin and red eyes reflecting off the moonlight pouring in through the window. The man had spoken to him, praised him for not cowering at his feet. He had watched as the man turned his attention to the younger boy in the other cot before he went about the task of burning some strange symbols into the floor with a bone-white wand. The work had been considerable and left the man rather breathless, but he had stood tall nonetheless, and aimed the wand at the still sleeping infant. He watched as his younger self jumped in front of the strange green light, his only thought being to prevent what was happening to his brother. A scream of agony tore through the room as everything faded to black, leaving him none the wiser as to where it had originated from. The memory had left him trembling, and he had put the book back on the shelf, unwilling or unable to admit what had become of him at such a tender age. For weeks and months he had pondered what he had learnt, denying the truth that he had unwittingly found. As much as he had wished he could continue living in blissful ignorance, he could not. Everything that had happened to him, everything that he had seen, pointed only to one conclusion. Though he was sure it had never been Tom's intention, he had turned him into a living, breathing Horcrux. "I'm still looking," he answered the older man. He had never spoken of his findings with any. He knew that his family had wished to protect him from the knowledge of what he had been, but it mattered not any longer. What had happened to him was in the past, and that was where he had intended on leaving it. He had succeeded until Tom had taken it upon himself to draw him back into his old life, rekindling some rivalry that Harry had never wanted. The man had gotten what he wanted after all. He had poked and prodded, finally murdering the same boy he had tried to protect when he had been not even old enough or capable to use a wand. It was different now. Harry was no longer a defenseless boy, and Tom Riddle would rue the day he ambled back into his life. Shaking his head of thoughts, he began carefully walking to where the unwelcome feeling felt strongest, and found himself peering down at an innocuous floorboard. With a flick of his wand, the board pulled away from the others with a loud snap, revealing a shallow hole. Creating a ball of light, he guided it to hover over the opening, illuminating a small jewelry box nestled in the bottom. As he levitated it out, it attempted to wrest itself from his grasp, only for Harry to tighten the magical hold he had over it. And with only a few muttered spells, he quickly deduced the box was no threat to him. What the box contained, however, was not so placid. As he reduced the container to ash with a ball of flame, the full effect of what resided within was felt. He slammed down his occlumency shields, fighting against the pull of the magic with all his might. As the heir of Black, he had been tutored extensively in compulsion charms, and this was as powerful as any he had been exposed to before. The urge to reach out and place the now visible ring on his finger was overwhelming, but he gritted his teeth against the drawer and leveled his wand towards it, his arms trembling against the conflict being fought within his mind. He sighed in relief as his aim was true, and the compulsion faded as his counter-curse collided with the ring, sending it to the floor with a metallic thud. Releasing a deep breath, he hunched over and cast a diagnostic charm, his relief growing as the imbued withering curse was revealed. He certainly had no desire to feel the effects of that particular spell. It was a slow death at best, with very few able to counter it once it had come into contact with a person. On an object, however, it was elementary to remove if one was practiced in the darker aspects of magic. With that dealt with, he delved deeper into the ring and found two very conflicting magics, both fighting for dominance over the other. He frowned. The ring was saturated in Tom's magic, but there was something else within it, both calling to him equally. His experiences of a such feeling had rarely been pleasant, and he had little desire to risk anything when it came to the Dark Lord. The ring began to positively vibrate as he took aim for a final time, seemingly attempting to escape on its own volition. "Fiendfire," he muttered, focusing on maintaining control of the summoned basilisk as it devoured the ring, eliciting an ear-splitting screech as it went about its task. Instinctively, Harry covered his ears and the fiery serpent vanished, the screech echoing only a second or so longer before it too faded to nothingness. His attention was caught quickly by the sound of running feet, his father and grandfather storming into the room, wands in hand. "What the bloody hell was that?" Arcturus questioned, scanning the carnage for any imminent danger. "It's done," Harry returned breathily. "Are you sure it was one?" "Completely," Harry answered. There was no doubt in his mind of what he had encountered, the magic too known to him, having carried it for so many years himself. "Good," Arcturus praised. "That's one less of the damned things out there. Now let's leave before we are discovered. That was one hell of a racket that thing made." Harry nodded and made to follow, pausing at the door as the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. His gaze turned towards the blackened spot on the floor where the ring had been destroyed and a small pile of ash remained. When he approached, it turned out not to be ash but a small black stone. The same magic he felt that hadn't been Tom's in the ring oozing from it. "Unbelievable," he whispered. Anything that was touched by the cursed flames no longer existed. This he knew. He had studied the fire extensively, and there was nothing that had ever survived direct contact from it. Whatever this stone was, it was one of a kind. Of that he had no doubt. Hurriedly he cast a few spells to ensure that it was safe before picking it up, his eyebrows raising at the way the magic almost embraced his own. Not having the time to ponder it further, he pocketed it, intending on investigating it in the privacy of his room, and joined Arcturus and Sirius outside the shack. "Are you all right?" his father questioned. "Yeah," Harry dismissed. "Just tired. Then we shall head home and keep our heads down for a few days. The shit is going to hit the fan after you speak to Rita tomorrow, so it will do us good to let it blow over," Arcturus suggested with a smirk. Harry could only agree with the older man. What he had to say would not please many, though he couldn't care less. He wasn't doing this for anyone other than himself, his future and the future that had been taken from his little brother. Time in the prison crawled at an unbearably slow pace. Had he not had his wand to hand, he would have believed he had been here for weeks. Sleep was nigh on impossible, the few minutes snatched here or there fitful and disturbed by either the ever-present cold or a scream from one of the inmates. Azkaban was a miserable place, and the misery only deepened the longer one spent within its walls. The exhaustion was beginning to take its toll on him both mentally and physically. He could feel his body weaken from depravity of rest and the poor diet. 3 times a day a bowl of unidentifiable slop would appear in the cell and vanish the moment the tasteless meal was consumed. Leo was fortunate he had the chocolate, something he was relying on more and more as the hours passed. Had it not been available, the task he had been given would have been all but impossible. He'd mustered the energy over the past 2 days to visit 3 other Death Eaters, though his efforts bore no fruit. Thorfinn Rowell was little more than a buffoon, albeit a dangerous one. He was an impressive duelist for one that lacked intellect and had barely been graced with a greeting from his master during his years of service. Leo could not fathom the level of loyalty he had to the man when he scarcely benefited from such devotion. His visit with the Lestrange brothers had been nothing short of sickening. Both men had proclivities towards those whom they targeted during their attacks. Sexual violence towards men, women and children that could not defend themselves was their forte. What Leo had seen these monsters commit would forever stain his memories. He had promised Arcturus he would not kill anyone, and his word was sorely tested with these 2. He didn't leave them unharmed, however. Neither would ever be able to indulge in their perversions again. A mixture of impotence, infertility and shrinking charms had put a stop to that. The savage blow to the jaw just an addition for his own gratification. Again, neither had found themselves far enough in the Dark Lord's good graces to warrant being made privy to anything worthwhile. Both were but bootlickers with an inclination and even talent for instilling fear through their disgusting acts. Neither much of a thinker in any regard. Leo released a deep breath as he placed another square of chocolate in his mouth. Allowing it to melt across his tongue and reveling in the warmth it gave him, however temporary. There were others he had to see, and the quicker his work was carried out, the quicker he could leave this place, though he doubted he would ever be completely the way he was. Azkaban changed people, and he could feel it changing him. Perhaps it was merely the permanent cold and despair that plagued the prisoners, or what he had seen in the mind of those he had invaded. Thus far, what he did know was that there was someone waiting for him on the outside, a sparkle in the darkness that shrouded him, but something worth clinging to. So long as he had that, he knew he could make it. He simply had to. Cornelius Oswald Fudge could only stare at the morning's edition of the Daily Prophet, his eyes bulging humorlessly at the headline on the front page, his skin purpling in rage as he gaped at the audacity of the Skeeter woman. She had always been known for her gossip, defaming well-respected members of the Wizengamot, or those in the limelight. This, however, went too far, even by Skeeter's standards. This was reckless and would spell the end of her career. Despite this, Cornelius felt a trickle of fear work its way down his spine before he removed his bowler hat and fiddled with it nervously. It could not be true, any of it. Black was trying to turn people away from the truth, that he had murdered his brother in cold blood. That was the only thing that made sense. He had kept the death of the boy out of the media so that the case against Black could be built. He had been grateful for the past few days of quiet on the matter, pleased that the Potters had not attempted to publish anything themselves as yet. He knew that it was inevitable that the news would break eventually, but he had planned accordingly for that. He could have spun it in a way that made him appear sensitive and helping the family bring the killer of their son to justice. He had not prepared for this, not expecting lies to this extent from even the notorious Blacks. He shuddered involuntarily at the thought of them. He had been lucky thus far that Arcturus Black had held his tongue on what he had learnt. But why had he? He had proven that he had enough on him to ensure the end of his career. Even a whisper of the knowledge he held would see Cornelius out of office within hours, so why hadn't he made his move? The thoughts unsettled the minister. The Blacks were not known for reticence, and he had expected that his tenure would end in only a matter of days. Despite the promise of the Lord, he would remain silent so long as his family was left alone. Cornelius did not believe him and felt the walls closing in. This too was something he had been preparing for. In the weeks since Black had accosted him trying to recruit the young Tonksarura into the fold, Cornelius had been making moves to secure his future, moving around some funds for if the need to leave arose. It was little more than an admission of guilt of his past transgressions, but he would be financially able to support himself, start a new life where he was out of reach of justice. He released a deep breath. He had only gone after the Black Heir at the behest of Lucius, who had assured him it was necessary. The boy would flee the country if not arrested, and the chance of putting Charlie Potter's killer behind bars with him. The question of how Lucius knew of his death before any other had irked him, even more so as more time went by without word from any other. His friend was resourceful, but as he eyed the newspaper laid upon his desk, he couldn't help but think it only corroborated the words of the article. If the Dark Lord had risen, Lucius would have been there. Cornelius had never been foolish enough to believe that so many prominent members of society had been under the imperious curse. However, it would be difficult to prove, and it served him no purpose to dig any further. Besides, had he followed his suspicions, his own position would have been forfeit, and that would not do. He growled as he pounded the desk with his fist. If there was any truth in the article, there would be mass panic and the Blacks had vanished into thin air. That he could be grateful for. It meant they had no further interest in him, or Arcturus Black had been lying as Lucius had insisted upon. The man had given the impression he knew things he shouldn't about Cornelius, but had provided nothing. The minister seethed at having been duped in such a way. He couldn't possibly know what he had hinted at. Had he wouldn't keep it to himself. He was a Black after all, treacherous to the very core. Dolores. The door opened a moment later, revealing the squat woman. "Yes, minister," she simpered. "Get Cuff in here now." "Cuff? The bloody editor of this rag," he roared, waving the newspaper around, exaggeratedly. "And Bones, I want this man arrested for these lies." Umbridge nodded animatedly, her jowls wobbling as she exited the room as quickly as her short legs would carry her. Cornelius sunk into his chair as he experienced a myriad of emotions. Predominantly he was furious, but scared also. He couldn't help but think that something much bigger was afoot, masked by the pomp on display. It mattered not, he would weather the impending storm and emerge victorious as he always did. Amelia Bones sipped her coffee, grimacing at the bitterness as it washed over her tongue. The ministry coffee was an acquired taste, strong with an almost sour note to it and unpalatable to most. Amelia, however, had become accustomed to it over the years she had spent working in the department, even enjoyed it in a twisted way. She rested the mug on her desk as she rifled through her missives, none requiring immediate attention. It had been rather quiet recently, something she was grateful for, though a period of such as this was followed by a flurry of activity and crime that stretched the team of auras below her to their limits. When she took time to consider what she had at her disposal, she found herself shaking her head. Since Fudge had come into office, he had taken every opportunity to introduce cutbacks, reduction of auras and budgeting measures that left the DMLE on the cusp of financial ruin. Whenever she raised her objections, the man pointed out that there was no longer a war to fund, and such numbers were no longer needed. Amelia disagreed vehemently. The department needed manpower to function effectively, funds for better training and money to progress. As a result of Fudge's penny-pinching, her workforce was a shadow of what it had once been. Overworked and tired men and women, poor equipment, a semi-functioning force at best, were a true threat to be posed to Wizarding Britain. She doubted there was little that could be done to prevent it. The auras of today were less than 1/5 in number, and very few could compare to those she had served with in the field. All in all, the entirety of the DMLE was a shambles. The peace of her coffee was intruded upon by an obnoxiously loud and frantic knocking at her door. "Enter," she barked, not hiding her irritation at being disturbed in such a way. She had to prevent herself from rolling her eyes as Dolores Umbridge entered the room, breathing heavily. She detested the woman, from the pink bow perched on her head to the horrible shoes she squeezed her swollen feet into every morning. Umbridge was the worst kind of person, a self-serving ass-kisser, who would spit on anyone to get what she wanted. "Cornelius has demanded you join him in his office," the toad wheezed. Amelia's lip curled in distaste as she stood and drained the final dregs of her brew, slamming the mug down unnecessarily hard as she glared at her intruder. Umbridge took the hint and waddled away. Amelia followed with a shake of her head. Fudge only ever summoned her for something pertaining to funding, or if he had done something foolish that he needed advice on. She was betting on the latter in this instance. The man had yet again proved his buffoonery with what had happened at the final of the Tri-Wizard tournament. No doubt something was now coming back to bite him. She arrived at his office and found the man pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace with Umbridge watching him, thankfully in silence. "You wanted to see me, Cornelius?" she called, causing the man to jump out of his skin. "Of course I bloody wanted to see you. Have you not read the paper this morning?" "Some of us have work to do," Amelia bit back. "Not all of us have the luxury of reading first thing." Umbridge turned a rather impressive shade of puce, but any retort was prevented by the blustering of the minister. Unable to find any words, he pointed at what had clearly offended him so much and gestured for her to read. She picked up the discarded newspaper, her mouth forming into a hard line as she read the article that had the minister so rattled. "Boy Who Lived Murdered. The Return of the Dark Lord, by Rita Skeeter. To my loyal readers, my deepest wish is that the title of this article was false or misleading at best. But I fear that it is not the case. As many of you are aware, during the final task of the Tri-Wizard tournament, the Dementors that had been stationed there ran amok and began attacking members of the crowd and students alike. I, along with many, have questioned what could lead to them acting in such a frenzied manner, and upon my investigations, I stumbled across a horrifying truth. A truth that has intentionally been kept from you, the wizarding public. During the fiasco of the third task, Charlie Potter, the boy who lived and natural hero, was kidnapped and subsequently murdered. Now it is no secret that there were many that would wish harm on him because of his part in the downfall of the Dark Lord, who was undoubtedly in control of the previous war. Were it not for the night he fell to Charlie Potter, he may well have been successful in his endeavors, but who after 13 long years would act against the boy? I hear you ask. During my investigation to discover just that, I was approached by Lord Arcturus Black, who made some very damning and interesting claims. I was invited to meet with the family in a secret location outside of England for an exclusive interview with the heir of the family and brother to Charlie Potter, Harry Black. I offer this transcript of our conversation. Harry, you claim to have been present when your brother was murdered. Could you explain to me what happened? I can. My brother was murdered by a man claiming to be he who must not be named. I must add that Harry used the Dark Lord's name. Right. That is a very bold claim to make. Can you back up your words with any evidence? Would you be opposed to viewing the memory? Initially I was skeptical and excited by the offer. If it were false, I would be able to prove the boy a liar, and if it proved authentic, be the first to alert the public to the danger we once again face. I viewed the memory and for the first time in my career, wished I had not been so keen. I needed considerable time to even process what I had witnessed, and come to terms with what had happened. In the past I have been referred to as cold, malicious, insensitive and even evil. What I witnessed within the Penjeeve will forever haunt me. Indeed, a man claiming to be the Dark Lord attacked Charlie Potter, and his brother did all he could to defend them both from the man himself and several men garbed in Death Eater attire. Both Harry and Charlie fought valiantly and were even momentarily successful against their assailants until a cowardly attack ended the life of the young Potter, who jumped in front of a killing curse aimed at his older sibling. Many would say I have been heartless and indifferent toward any I have targeted during my work, but the sight of Harry Black trying to rouse his brother from death had me reaching for tissues. Overwhelmed, I took time to compose myself before continuing with the interview. I do not wish to offend you, Harry, but many will ask the question as to why you were there. I was transported there as I took the Tri-Wizard Cup during the final task. It had been turned into a portkey. Who would be able to do such a thing? Your guess is as good as mine, Rita. I sense that Harry knows more than he is saying on the matter, but I decide to ask the question that needed to be answered, not wanting to provoke the ire of the family that had been so hospitable to me thus far. Why have you not reported it to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement? Harry laughed at my question, his grey eyes flashing an emerald color that left me fidgeting in my chair in discomfort. If I felt that the British Ministry was competent in investigating the matter without prejudice, I may have been compelled to do so. Prejudice? Yes? Only hours after I managed to escape the man claiming to be the Dark Lord and his cohorts, Minister Fudge attempted to have me arrested for the murder of my brother whilst I was unconscious and unable to defend myself. Had it not been for Lord Wayland, he would have done so. When I woke to the news that I was a wanted man, I found it rather strange that the minister was able to find enough evidence to arrest me, an innocent man. As such, I felt it was in my best interest to seek sanctuary so that a repeat incident did not occur. Very strange, don't you think, that not even the DMLE had been informed of the death of my brother, yet the minister knew and had taken it upon himself to investigate the matter. Very strange indeed. Apologies, but may I backtrack slightly? Harry nods his consent. You mentioned that Lord Wayland prevented your arrest? Lord Wayland, for those not familiar with the young man, is the lord that defeated Lucius Malfoy in single combat earlier this year. What I have also learnt during my investigation is that the actions of the very same young lord were pivotal in fighting off the Dementors during the final task of the tournament, when they ran amok. As such, Wizarding Britain owes him a great debt for his role in protecting our younger generation when it was needed. He defended me when I was unable to do so. Minister Fudge arrived with an entourage of Auroras and Lucius Malfoy to arrest me. Lord Wayland valiantly defended me against the disgusting act, and was arrested for his actions. For this, I call on any reading this to demand his immediate release. He did nothing but protect an innocent person. Why would Lord Malfoy be there? Another strange coincidence. I'm sure you would agree. Only hours earlier his former master returns, and he is part of the party that arrives to have me arrested for a murder no official is aware of. Lucius Malfoy was cleared of all charges. He was under the Imperious curse during the previous war. I am once more taken aback by a bark of laughter from Harry. A weak and false defense. He has the dark mark. It is well documented. Receiving the mark requires a magical vow, something that cannot be given under the Imperious Curse, or through any other form of manipulative spell, potion, or magic. Right, you seem to know an awful lot about the mark. Not even the top ministry researchers were able to discover much about it. Harry shakes his head. Height. I'd like to know how much research was done on the nature of the magic by the ministry. Again, showing only but incompetence if they were unable to figure out what a 16-year-old could. Amelia felt her stomach sink at what she had read thus far. Harry Black was exposing not only Fudge's foolishness, but also the suspicions she had long since held. She had always questioned the veracity of the defense put forth by Malfoy and the other Death Eaters claiming to be under the Imperius. At every turn, any effort she made to investigate the matter had been shut down, usually by the minister himself. She wouldn't usually trust a Black, but in the matter of dark magic there were none more educated in the field. This piece did not paint Fudge or the ministry in a positive light, and if the public believed even a shred of it, there could be severe repercussions for them all. How much of this is true? She questioned the still pacing man. It is all rubbish. Fudge spat. So, you did not try to arrest him without informing me, without revealing to me the results of an investigation? The man sputtered incoherently, confirming her thoughts on the matter. You bloody fool, Cornelius. It is not your job to carry out arrests. It is mine. If you had enough evidence to suggest that Harry Black was involved in the murder of his brother, why did you not bring it to me? It was a matter of urgency, Amelia. He needed to be arrested before he fled. Amelia released a deep breath through her nostrils. On what evidence did you attempt to apprehend him? Lucius. No, Cornelius. What evidence was there to arrest him? The man hung his head defeatedly. And Lord Wayland? He physically attacked Dawlish and held me at one point. Fudge defended. Why was his file not provided detailing his arrest? I've had every record on my desk from the past few days, but not that one. It is in the process of being completed. And you sent him to Azkaban without a trial date. I was going to arrange it today, the minister replied heatedly. Amelia shook her head. The man could not understand just how stupid he had proven to be. You have sent a lord to Azkaban without a trial, she began, holding up a finger highlighting his first mistake. Without a trial, and someone who is now going to be hailed a hero, and rightly so, for keeping students of Hogwarts and beyond our borders safe from your own incompetence. Fudge began purpling in rage, and Amelia shot him a chastising glare. Even the minister was not immune to her ire when it was provoked. What the hell do you think the French and Irish ministries will have to say about it? Not only that, what about the public here? This alone will cause an horrific uproar. That's even before we get to the crap about the return of Voldemort. Fudge flinched at the use of the name. Come now, Amelia, you don't believe the boy. He's trying to cover up his own crime. The Dark Lord is dead. Amelia again shook her head as her gaze returned to the article, to finish the final words. It was when she turned the page that she was confronted with a plethora of images that Skeeter claimed were provided by Harry and his memory of what happened the night Charlie Potter had been murdered. None were pleasant, but the image of the pale man clad in dark robes caused her to shudder. She had lost family during the last war, and if there was a chance that he was back, she would not risk the last member of it, due to ignorance. If he isn't, then any preparations we make will not hurt us, she returned. And if he is, then may Merlin save us, because we cannot cope if it is anything like it was before. Fudge erupted in rage and threw a stack of books on his desk against the wall. He's dead, Amelia. Pull yourself together. The boy is lying. The minute Cuffer gets here, I will have the truth of the matter. The man's eyes bulged, and Amelia couldn't tell if his anger was from desperation or misguided certainty. It says here that Harry Black has submitted his memory to the Swiss representative of the ICW. They are going to verify it and will discuss their findings as and when necessary, Amelia explained, gesturing to the paper. Why would he do that if he was lying? Because he's bloody deranged, Fudge seethed, unwilling to listen to logic. Amelia remained quiet, and the uncomfortable atmosphere eventually broken by a knock at the door. Without prompt, a large-suited man entered the room confidently, his deep brown eyes oozing intelligence and displeasure in equal amounts. What do you want, Fudge? He demanded irritably. What do I want? The man returned, in disbelief. I want to know why you have allowed these lies to be printed in your paper. The man shrugged as he inspected his fingernails. I see no lies, he denied. Rita brought me a rather concerning story, and I printed it. The complexion of the minister immediately turned its most vibrant shade of purple. You believe this? This bullshit. Cuff. The man narrowed his eyes dangerously. I have every reason to. Rita supplied the memory and I verified it myself. What Harry Black saw is completely authentic, and I have no reason to doubt anything else he has said either. We had a deal, Cuff. Fudge growled menacingly. And I held up my end. Cuff shrugged. I kept your name out of the final task fiasco. As far as I'm concerned, our understanding came to an end the night you asked me to ensure you were not mentioned in the coverage. Our deal, as you so eloquently put it, did not negate my responsibility for reporting such a danger to the public. For years you had a hold over me, but do not push your luck, Fudge. I have enough dirt on you to see you swing. And are you, Fudge retorted heatedly. Amelia watched the exchange between the two with rapt attention, hoping that one would release a bit of information that would warrant an arrest. Personally, she was hoping Fudge would prove his usual idiotic self and be the first to crack. Do as you please, Minister Cuffey urged. I will go to prison with a clean conscience, knowing I did not attempt to conceal such a danger from the masses. You believe him, Cuffey? Amelia interjected before Cornelius could provoke the man further. If I did not, Madam Bones, would I be painstakingly having the Prophet headquarters emptied as we speak? Would I be paying a considerable sum to a team of experts to ward my home? Would I risk my life and the life of my family on a report such as this, if it were baseless? Amelia sighed as she shook her head. She'd of course had her doubts, but no longer. Barnabas Cuffer was not a man easily scared or coerced. If he believed the evidence put forth to him, she had little reticence in believing his word. Shit, she muttered. Herself and the department were not equipped to deal with the impending threat the man would pose. She turned to vocalize her thoughts to the minister, but was interrupted by one of her auras bursting into the room. Minister? What is it? Fudge questioned irritably. There's a rather large gathering in the atrium, sir. I thought you should know. Amelia sighed internally as she followed the man to the elevator and joined him on the way down. Before arriving, it was clear that the mob of people would not be happy and demanding answers that she could not give. When the gates opened, she knew it was much worse than she could have imagined. As far as the eye could see were people, some holding up crudely constructed signs calling for Fudge to resign, others demanding the release of Lord Wayland, and many others supporting Harry Black. And so it begins, she muttered under her breath. Amelia knew not where to begin. She would need to find a way to speak to Harry Black. Dumbledore would certainly need to be consulted, and she had to take stock of what was available to her. It would not be enough, but it would need to be done. Firstly, however, she had to prevent the gathered crowd from turning violent and disperse them as peacefully as possible. Harry sat at his desk, his gaze shifting between the strange stone he had recovered from the Horcrux and the cloak he had been gifted by the Potters. His grandfather had handed him a letter from his birth parents along with the cloak the day after their excursion. His first instinct had been to discard the letter out of hand, but he had faltered. Even more so when he felt the familiarity of the magic that saturated the cloak wash over him. It was identical to that of the stone, and it only made him question further the origins of both items. The magic was unlike anything else he had ever encountered. The cloak, he knew, was old, older than any invisibility cloak had the right to be. He'd had similar cloaks of his own too, in fact, both succumbing to the ravages of time, the charms fading as was the norm. According to Sirius, this was the very same cloak himself and the other self-styled marauders had used at school to carry out their mischievous deeds. If true, this cloak had to be decades in age, longer if it had indeed been passed on from his paternal grandfather, as Sirius had explained. James had passed it off as a family heirloom during his school years, and none had ever had reason to question him. There was certainly something Potteresque about the magic, Harry could be certain of that, but there was more, much more. There was also the same familiarity of Tom's magic, which only added to the confusion, but again, there was something deeper. There was something almost eerie about the items, something that felt as though they did not belong, that they went against nature itself. He'd yet had the time to ponder further than his initial musings, and he was keen to put his mind to the matter at his earliest possible opportunity, along with the contents of the missive. Now, however, he had something more important that required his attention. For the past 2 nights he had been preparing his first strike against Tom. For hours he had watched his target go about his business, as though he hadn't a care in the world, as though he wasn't complicit in the murder of his brother. Perhaps the man hadn't attended the graveyard, but as far as Harry was concerned, he was guilty by association. Any who carried the mark carried the guilt. Finding the man had taken very little effort. According to Rita, he had pled the same defense as Malfoy and many others at the conclusion of the previous war. As such, he had been pardoned of all crimes committed whilst under the influence of the curse. Since the war, he had lived off the wealth his forebears had accumulated, contributing nothing to the family coffers. His was a minor house, but a wealthy one nonetheless. It mattered not to Harry. He would merely be the first on a sizable list of those that would pay their dues and become a scapegoat for his cause. Either way, Tom would have to come out into the open eventually, if only to assure his people that it was not him killing those seemingly loyal to him. That would be only a matter of time, and Harry couldn't help that hope the man would delay the inevitable. It would only benefit him after all. Standing, he summoned his robes, and checked he had everything he needed for his task. It would not do to be caught short because he had been unprepared. Certain he had everything, he disapparated and appeared a reasonable distance away from the home of his target. The wards here were well put together, and Harry would not pretend he understood the construct of them. Runes had always been a sore point for him, but magic he knew. He had a very intrinsic and instinctive grasp on magic as a whole. He could sense intent, nature, and even things hidden in the nooks and crannies that most didn't know even existed. He couldn't be sure if it was his previous ailment that accentuated it so, but what he did know was that his instincts had very rarely let him down. The only things that had stumped him so far was the ring and the cloak, and those he would decipher in due course. He silenced his steps as he walked towards the large gates. The property in full view at the top of a slight hill. Reaching them, he held his wand but an inch away from the metal, double-checking that nothing had changed within the scheme. He'd studied. As he expected, it hadn't. Though numerous, it took only a few moments to bend the spells to his will, and open a gap wide enough for him to enter the property without triggering the alarm. His first obstacle removed, he waited for the inevitable arrival of the second, which came a few seconds later in the form of a house elf. Before the creature could catch its bearings, Harry removed its head with a silent, severing curse. A quick and painless death for the little being, one that was unavoidable if he were to remain undetected after his work here was complete. With another wave of his wand, the corpse and resulting blood vanished, leaving his path now clear. It was only a matter of waiting for his victim to arrive home, which would occur within the next minutes. In the interim, Harry entered the house and made himself comfortable on a sofa. The man he sought lived alone, so there was no further need of a clandestine approach. Only a few moments later he heard the roar of the fire and footsteps as the flow network deposited his target into the next room. The sounds of movement paused before the man that arrived spoke. "Fucking elf!" he grumbled. "Alden, where are you, you useless shit?" The steps continued, echoing off the hard wooden floor as the door opened with a crash. His eyes widened as he took in the sight of Harry, who froze the man in place with a flick of his wand. "Mr. Yaxley," he whispered almost excitedly. The adrenaline he felt warmed him, but less so than the feeling of righteousness that enveloped him. He was doing this for his brother, a brother this man had helped murder. Yaxley's eyes widened in fear, and Harry suspected he would be trembling were he able to. "We are going to have a conversation, and the answers you give me will decide how merciful I am when it comes to your death. Make no mistake, Corbin, you are going to die. How that happens relies entirely on how cooperative you are with me. Understood?" Harry disarmed the man and snapped the wand he found in two before carrying out a cursory search. Yaxley had nothing else on him, so he guided him into a nearby chair and secured him to it with thick ropes. "I didn't have anything to do with it, Black. I swear." "Help!" he shouted desperately. Harry chuckled darkly as he shook his head. "That is your first lie," he admonished, flicking his wand in the direction of the man. The ropes he'd used to bind him turned into a spiked chain that dug painfully into the flesh. Yaxley screamed as he felt the points enter his muscles. "Scream as much as you wish, Corbin. No one will be coming for you." He did so, and after a few moments of agony, Harry reverted the chains back to plain ropes, against his own wishes. He'd rather the man suffered for the entirety of the encounter, but he needed him lucid. Yaxley panted heavily as he attempted to steady his breathing, a difficult task when faced with the emerald eyes boring into his own. He felt a bead of sweat run down his back, the salt of the sweat stinging his wounds enough to make him wince further from the inflictions. Fear was not something he was accustomed to. For years he'd had the protection of the Dark Lord, and, even when the man had vanished, his reputation preceded him. It was others that feared him, had them bowing respectfully to his presence, treating him above the norm in case he, a known Death Eater, albeit acting on another's volition, decided to act against them for even an imagined slight. The years had been good to him, those that feared the Dark Lord, better. The occasional visit from the Auras to ensure he was law-abiding was but a minor inconvenience. Now, however, he was questioning if the frivolity of it all had been worth it. Now that he found himself in this position, the Blacks were the family the darker families used to scare their unruly children into compliance. The tales of them told enough to leave a youth unable to sleep for days. Many would never need meet a member of the rather reclusive family, but if one was unfortunate, they would realize these stories told were not merely fabrications, but a warning that if provoked, all manner of horrors were to be inevitably your fate. He'd met Bellatrix. He knew what monsters the family could sire firsthand, but even her insanity and proclivity towards violence could not match the young man stood before him. Harry Black oozed a darkness, so very similar to that of his master, that he would hard-pressed to differentiate between the two if it weren't for the green eyes, now narrowed towards him. Crucio. Harry spat, his wand leveled towards his victim. Another scream was torn from Yaxley's throat as he thrashed against the ropes, pain lancing through every fiber of his being. Harry relented after only a few moments, his nostrils flaring as Yaxley began breathing heavily once more. "It hurts, doesn't it, Corbin? I wonder how many people you have done the same to, how many men, women and children sat helpless as you find yourself, whilst you and yours tortured them. How many was it, Yaxley?" The final question was finished with a blow to the jaw that rattled his teeth, and left his head spinning. His thoughts were addled, his mind focusing only on the pain. After a moment he felt his chin grip tightly, and he was forced to look at his captor, his face swimming slowly into view. "How many?" Corbin swallowed deeply. "I don't know," he croaked. Harry nodded as he pushed Yaxley's face away in disgust. "Your first honest answer," he almost praised. "How does it feel being on the other side? Do you fear me, Corbin?" The man could only nod. Even a fool would be able to recognize the helplessness of his situation. "Please, I'm sorry." His words were met with another blow, this one impacting against his left knee. He felt the bone crack, and he gritted his already damaged teeth to prevent another pitiful moan from escaping. His efforts were in vain. He roared in agony as the bone shattered, rendering his limb useless. "I thought we had gotten past the lies," Harry sighed. "There is no sorrow about you, Corbin. You are saying what you think I want to hear. It's not apologies I want, it is only the truth I am after." Yaxley slumped defeatedly as much as his bindings would allow, his only thoughts now focusing on what he would have to endure before he was granted his end. "Let us try again, shall we?" Harry interrupted his reverie. "Did you answer the summons of Tom when he called you to the graveyard?" Corbin nodded reluctantly. "See, the truth isn't so hard, is it? How long have you served him?" "Since 1973, Yaxley answered. "And did you join him willingly?" He nodded again. "I did." "Do you regret any of your actions?" Corbin swallowed as he shook his head. "Not a thing." "Excellent," Harry announced, as he seized the man by his chin once more. "Don't worry, Corbin, you're only one of many on my list that I plan on visiting. I do hope for their sake they are as cooperative as I've found you to be." Yaxley's gaze shifted and he met the emerald orbs of the younger man. Immediately he felt a strong pressure in his mind as memories long past surfaced. all his misdemeanors in life being perused as Black rifled through his innermost thoughts and actions. Not even the most intimate was spared, though he tried to defend himself. He was simply no match for his opponent. Eventually the pressure eased and his head throbbed painfully as though someone was pounding a drum inside his skull. "You're quite the disgusting creature, Yaxley," Harry whispered, "and for all you have done to others but mostly me, you are going to die a rather unpleasant death." Before he could protest, he felt a burning from within spread quickly across his body, though no flames were visible. He mustered an almighty scream as he watched his hands begin to blacken and flake away, his flesh and bone reducing to ash in front of him. Both arms and legs followed suit, before the searing receded as quickly as it had begun. "Unfortunately, I do need there to be some evidence," Harry sighed. Avada Kedavra. Corbin Yaxley could do nothing as the jet of green light careened towards him and enveloped him in darkness, his final moments having been agonizing and demeaning. For a few moments Harry simply stared at what remained of the man, gathering his thoughts. He felt no guilt for what he had done. Yaxley deserved what he'd received, and so much more for his own actions in life. But it was an experience he did not relish. He'd been taught to be ruthless, punish transgressions against him and the family with unwavering ferocity when needed, and he'd done just that. Corbin Yaxley had proven himself a threat, an enemy and even complicit in the murder of his brother. For that he had to be punished, and it had to be Harry that carried it out. He would not accept it being done any other way. Standing, he swept his gaze across the room before casting several spells to conceal his identity. When all was said and done, Corbin Yaxley would be deemed a victim of his own associates. Exiting the property, he aimed his wand towards the sky, and released the dark mark with purpose for the first time, certain that those within the houses visible in the distance would be unable to miss it hovering above the dwelling he had intruded upon. And satisfied with his work, he returned home, ready to plan his next move against Tom Riddle. After what felt to be the longest, most stressful day in his career, Cornelius Fudge finally arrived home. Groaning at the cloak above his mantle, he settled himself in his favorite chair in front of the fire, contemplating the worth of the few hours' sleep he would be lucky to get before he was needed back in the office. Grumbling at his plight, he summoned himself a bottle of Ogden's finest and conjured a suitable tumbler before pouring himself an exceedingly generous measure and taking a much-needed sip. "Comfortable, Minister?" A gravelly voice sounded, causing him to drop the almost full glass. Cornelius whipped around in the direction the voice had sounded, only for his wand to be ripped from his grasp. "Guards!" he shouted desperately as he flung himself to the ground. "Tut, tut, Minister, that's no way to treat a guest." Cornelius turned, and was met by the sight of Arcturus Black stalking towards him. In one hand he held his own wand, and the other, the one belonging to him, hung limply at his side. "By Black, what do you think you are doing?" he returned firmly, his anger outweighing the severity of the position he found himself in. "Well, I thought it was about time you got your comeuppance, Fudge. I did warn you not to fuck with my family." "You can't, you'll never get away with it," Cornelius stuttered, his eyes darting to and fro looking for an escape or anything that would help him. Black laughed in reply, his steely eyes dancing in mirth. "I already have, and I have you to thank for it, you pompous little bastard." Cornelius whimpered as he was seized by the front of his robes and cried out as Arctus drove his head into his nose. "You see, I've been keeping a very close eye on you. I know about all the funds you have been moving around, about all the favors you've been calling in, and every dirty deed you've been a party to since you took office. Come the morning, the entirety of Wizarding Britain will know also. Do you want to know the best part?" Cornelius could only shake his head as blood pumped from his nose, his vision obscured by tears of pain and fear. "They will think that you have run away and are hiding like a coward," Arcturus whispered gleefully. "Please, I didn't mean to," he tried. "Of course you did," Arcturus dismissed. "You thought yourself untouchable, above my family. I told you, Fudge. I gave you fair warning, and yet you persisted on a foolish path. For what you have done, you must pay the price. In this case, the price is your life." Cornelius whimpered as he felt his bladder release of its own accord. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. "My wife," he pleaded. "Dead." Arcturus shrugged uncaringly. "You fuck with my family, I fuck with yours. You pushed me one too many times, Minister. Did you not think I would have my revenge? I am a black. There are none better than us of my blood. Perhaps you should have learned that. I was always ahead of you. I simply needed the right moment to act." Cornelius sobbed uncontrollably, muttering his disbelief. His wife was innocent in all this. "Don't be so upset, Minister. I will do you a final kindness of reuniting you with her. Is that what you would like?" Cornelius Fudge glared furiously at the man that still held him in his grasp. He'd been bested on all fronts, and Arcturus Black would get away with it. Monsters like him always did. "Goodbye, Fudge," Arcturus growled. Avada Kedavra. A flash of green light illuminated the room briefly, and the Black Patriarch felt the minister fall limp to the ground, with a soft thud. With a shake of his head he vanished the corpse and cleared away any trace that he had been here. The rest of the work to fit his story had been completed earlier in the evening when he had arrived. When the auras came looking, it truly would look as though the minister had fled, the knowledge that his transgressions against the people he served spurring his cowardice into action. All that was left for him to do was to find a suitable candidate as a replacement. It would not do to have gone to all this effort only for Fudge to be replaced with another as unfavorable. He had an idea of whom he would have in office, but it needed to be considered further. For now he wanted nothing more than to return home, so after triple-checking his work, he left the residence of the now former Minister of Magic and did just that. His endeavor had left him depleted, and a good night's sleep was in order. The Dark Lord looked upon the discarded newspapers that he had accumulated over the past few days, his head shaking in disbelief and confusion. Not only had his plan to implicate Potter in the death of his brother, albeit concocted hastily, failed spectacularly, but the political field had been altered and not likely in his favor. With Fudge in power, Lucius would have been able to manipulate situations to his advantage, had laws passed or at the very least diverted unwanted attention away from what he was doing. That advantage was no more. Potter's article detailing his return had seen to that. Even if he were not believed, the wizarding population would be cautious, and the lords would only install someone into the office of minister who had no questionable past or links to his movement. Worse still was the revelation that Potter's closest confidant was in Azkaban with his most loyal followers. Lord Voldemort was aware that the Blacks had a long reach, but was it so vast that such a coup was possible? He knew not, and he was not willing to risk such a threat to his most devout. He needed to liberate them, and soon. All of this, troubling as it was, could not compare to the fury he was feeling, having learnt of the fate of Corbin Yaxley. Any aspersions that could have been cast on Potter's version of events were null now that a prominent member of society had been murdered under the guise of his own mark. He had ordered no such thing, yet it would be him blamed for the act. Again, the Blacks were undoubtedly involved in this, and the Dark Lord couldn't help but think he may have made an error in provoking them when his control over even his own men was tenuous at best. The family had officially taken a neutral stance in the previous conflict with the exception of Bellatrix and Regulus. Pondering the latter, he stilled. Regulus had proven to be a traitor, the first and only to discover his secret only due to his own hubris. He had not expected the boy to take such an interest in what he'd borrowed the elf for. Evidently he had, but Regulus Black certainly was not in any position to have told any of his findings. He had been located within minutes of breaching the wards in the cave and disposed of quickly, his secret taken to a watery grave amongst the rest of his inferi. He shook his head, not allowing the errors of his past haunt him further. It was here and now that required his focus, and his next step had been decided. He would free those loyal to him from their incarceration and add the Dementors to his steadily growing numbers. Potter and the Blacks may have been busy, but he had been equally so. His numbers were growing, and those of value would further his course at the earliest possible time, a time fast approaching. With the public focused on the election of a new minister, their attention would be far from the fortress out to sea where he would make his next move. For days Katie Bell had struggled with the knowledge that Leo had been locked away in Azkaban, and she was none the wiser as to why or what had happened. She was terrified, angry that no one had the decency to tell her. Instead, she'd had to learn of his fate when Rita Skeeter's article about the Dark Lord's return had been published. She'd tried to send an owl to Harry, but to no avail. Evidently he was somewhere warded against such means of communication. Her efforts rebuffed, she had taken to spending much of her time in her room, worrying about her idiot boyfriend. Angelina and Alicia had both been over to offer her comfort, though it had done little to lift her mood. Even her mother didn't know what to say to her, and her father had been rather silent on the matter. She did not want to be comforted, she found, and she did not want platitudes. She wanted answers, and she was running out of ideas on where she would get them. She had considered going to Dumbledore but had her doubts he would be of help. He would offer her a confusing line or two and send her on her way with a smile. That would not suffice. She huffed as she continued staring at the blank ceiling above from her position on the bed. She was furious with him, but she missed him also. She wasn't sure if she would squeeze the life out of him when she saw him next or send a couple of rogue bludgers after the boy. What she did know was that she was not content with waiting. If she heard nothing of his fate soon, she would take matters into her own hands. Someone at the ministry would have the answers she sought, and with Fudge seemingly having run away, people may be more likely to talk. From the moment the revelations had been made in Fudge's office, life for Amelia Bones had been nothing but stress upon stress. The aforementioned minister had vanished, his financial activity criminally suspicious. The fool had the gall to supplement his own wealth with funds from the ministry, clearly believed he could get away with it. She'd had her best auras looking for the man to no avail. Wherever Cornelius Fudge had vanished to was far enough away from her reach. She clenched her fists under her desk. She wanted him in custody, would take joy in seeing him in cuffs for all he had done over the years. If Fudge was her only problem, she would be ecstatic. The whispers of the Dark Lord's return were growing louder. A disappearance here or the odd attack occurring in the same manner, the Death Eaters of old would carry them out. Most disturbing, however, was the murder of Corbin Yaxley. Amelia could only assume he had done something to provoke the ire of Voldemort. From what she believed, Yaxley was an ally of many of those who followed the man. Him being one of those also, or so he was accused and acquitted. Whomever had attacked Yaxley had made him suffer. What remained of his corpse had not been pleasant to look upon. Both arms and legs were missing, and he'd been subject to considerable torture, and yet no trace of his assailant was to be found. Only the dark mark above his abode. She rubbed her eyes as she looked over the report the two investigating auras had drawn up, neither hopeful at identifying the perpetrator. Rufus was adamant he wanted the person or people responsible found and refused to accept there were no leads. Even after perusing the file himself, the man had been made interim minister, a permanent position, Wizengamot, vote pending. He would be a good choice. He was incorruptible, of sound military mind, and would make the difficult decisions with due haste, all of which would be needed in the coming months. Scrimgeour aside, there was one other Amelia wished to speak with, though reaching him had proven be impossible. Harry Black had borne witness to the resurrection of the Dark Lord, and she would have his version of events in person. There were far too many variables and far too many connected events for everything that had happened to simply be a coincidence. And she had her suspicions that Harry Black was somehow what connected them all. Not that she had any proof, of course. For all intents and purposes, Harry Black was a victim of circumstance, one who had the admiration of the people and was essentially untouchable as things stood. If his involvement with anything that had happened was beyond being present when Voldemort re-emerged, it would be damned difficult to prove. Cornelius had disappeared and no one else was talking. The Blacks had not been seen nor heard from since the day they left Hogwarts, and her only way to a conversation with a member of the family would not return for a few days yet. She would have Nymphadora Tonks in her office the moment she returned, along with Rufus, who had already broached the subject with her only yesterday. What interest he had in the girl, she didn't know. Whatever it was, Amelia could only hope that her aura had not been compromised, was still as dedicated to her role and loyal to the ministry. She had questioned the nature of her relationship with Black, and had even encouraged it. Amelia couldn't help but feel that she may have made an error. She could only hope her feelings on the matter were off the mark, though she had her doubts. Arcturus Black took a swig of his coffee as he sat at the table, his body still recovering from his efforts in dealing with Cornelius Fudge. He had been gleeful, ecstatic even, that his plan had gone off without a hitch. Though it had drained him physically, he had spent the following days resting, reminiscing how in his younger years such efforts would have left negligible effects in the aftermath. This endeavor, however, had left him drained. The sheer amount of magic used to infiltrate the admittedly impressive wards around the minister's home and carry out his work had been considerable. "Feeling better?" the voice of his heir interrupted as he entered the room. "Much," the older man replied, gracing the boy with a rare smile. He watched as Harry busied himself with preparing breakfast before joining him at the table. It was early, the sun still not risen, and it would be some time before Sirius or Cassie woke. Harry was like him in this regard, both early risers, not wanting to waste time with something so frivolous as extra sleep, not when there were things that required their attention. "Something on your mind?" Arcturus questioned. Noticing a frown marring Harry's features, the boy paused his eating, frown deepening as he released a deep breath. "I'm still not sure it was wise revealing that Leo is in Azkaban. There are so many things that could go wrong." Arcturus nodded his agreement. "There are risks," he conceded. "However, him knowing he is there will force his hand. He will not be willing to chance his most loyal followers with a threat as considerable as the one Leo poses to them. He will act quickly and in doing so, will be reckless. A perfect opportunity that we would be foolish to not take advantage of." "I know," Harry answered. "I just don't like how risky it is." Arcturus nodded his understanding. "He will be fine, and with your input he will escape so long as he's not foolish enough to attempt to engage the Dark Lord." Harry snorted. "This is Leo we are talking about." Arcturus grinned. "He's a brash fool at times, but not with something like this," he offered assuredly. "Have you made your preparations?" "I finished them last night. That cloak is something else. I just walked in without anyone knowing a thing about it." Arcturus frowned. Invisibility cloaks were useful, but not infallible and certainly not capable of breaching wards. He knew not where it originated from, but it was proving to be the useful tool. "Do you have any ideas of where it came from?" Harry shrugged. "There are so many different magics interwoven into the thing that it is impossible to tell. Whoever made it knew what they were doing or had one fortunate accident whilst trying to create something else. Something to ponder another time," Arcturus offered, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "Whatever it is, I have no doubt you will figure it out now. Whom is it you will be visiting next?" "I've been keeping an eye on Walden McNair. He's been tasked with negotiating with the giants on mainland Europe. I don't think that is an advantage we want them to have." "It is not," Arcturus sighed. "How did you learn of this?" Harry chuckled. "He was talking quite openly about it in a pub." "Imbecile," Arcturus growled. "Do not underestimate him, however. Harry McNair is a very dangerous man." "I'm not. I know exactly what he is capable of." "Good," Arcturus praised. "You deal with him and I will be working on some political issues." "Like who is going to replace Fudge?" "Exactly," the older man confirmed. "So, not Scrimgeour?" Arcturus shook his head. "I have a couple of people in mind I believe would be most beneficial to us, but one would be much easier to elevate to the position." "Bones?" Arcturus nodded. "However, I think she is better suited to leading the DMLE. She is the witch we need in charge of the auras, not behind a bloody desk." "Who else then?" "That, my boy, is something I am still considering. All will be revealed in due course," Arcturus explained as he stood and took his leave. Harry could only watch as the man exited. Shaking his head, he began pondering his own work, and what needed to be done. He cared not who was made minister. It would only become an issue if that person intervened in his own efforts, something that he would not allow. Along with his own personal feelings, he was more focused on the impending funeral of his brother that would take place within the week. Whomever his grandfather saw fit to take was fine by him. Entering the ministry on her return to duties was a strange experience. The usually sedate place of workers stopping for conversations with peers, or those loitering in the atrium, were all but absent. Now most walked with purpose, gaining none with polite chatter, and only short nods of acknowledgement as greetings seemed to be customary. Ignoring this noticeable change, she made it into the lift, and exited on the floor that would lead her to her tiny cubicle and hopefully a desk devoid of work needing to be completed. She snorted. Though she had been away for some time, there would undoubtedly be something that required her attention. She found her space the way it had been left. Well, almost. There was no paperwork, no files, nor anything that required her attention other than her boss seated in her chair awaiting her arrival. "It's good to have you back, Aura Tonks. I'd like you to join me in my office in 5 minutes. "Yes, ma'am," Tonks complied, frowning as Amelia Bones left her cubicle without preamble. "Not in trouble already, are you, Tonks?" Kingsley interrupted, his head appearing above the wall that separated their stations. She shrugged, non-committedly. She'd been having a spate of mixed emotions to returning to work. A part of her couldn't wait to get back to normality, but the other side wanted no part of it. Her idyllic view of her job had been shattered, having witnessed her own colleagues' corruption. When they attempted to arrest Harry and even her own superior had interfered in her personal life. She believed Amelia had her best interests at heart, but from what she witnessed over this past year, even those supposed to be the best of them had fallen from grace. It had left her with a rather jaded view of those she had once held in high esteem. "Aren't I always?" she quipped. Kingsley chuckled and shook his head before disappearing from view. She liked Kingsley, respected his morals and prowess with a wand, but she could no longer trust the man. He had chosen his side and she hers. With a sigh, she made her way towards Madame Bones' office and knocked. "Come in," the stern voice of the woman commanded. Bracing herself, Tonks opened the door and found herself facing Madame Bones. As expected, what she had not been expecting was the presence of Rufus Scrimger, former head of the Aru department and now interim Minister of Magic. His keen yellow eyes were unnerving as ever, and she fought against a nervous shudder that threatened to overcome her as they took in her appearance. "Take a seat, Tonks," Amelia almost barked, gesturing to a chair in front of the desk. Scrimger perched himself on the side of the desk, waiting for her to do as she was bid. "Now, as I said, it is good to have you back, Tonks. We must, however, put any concerns that may exist to rest," Amelia began diplomatically. Scrimger snorted derisively as he shook his head. "Concerns is putting it lightly, Bones. She is associated with a person of interest in a murder investigation." "It is downright alarming," Scrimger countered. "Have you not seen the memory that Harry provided? Do you not think you should be focusing on dealing with Voldemort?" Tonks bit back. "He allowed you to see the memory so that you can prepare. Instead, you're trying to pin it on the person who has opened your eyes to the danger we are facing." "All unsubstantiated claims," Scrimger dismissed. "Unsubstantiated," Tonks retorted. Death Eaters attacked the Quidditch World Cup. The Triwizard Tournament was riddled with activities matching their motives, and you have a verified memory of Voldemort's rise and him murdering Charlie Potter. Scrimger shook his head. "On the word and memory of a boy with questionable motives. You are allowing your personal feelings to interfere with your judgment, Aura Tonks. No, you're just too blind to see what is right in front of you." "Are you scared, Scrimgeour?" The man's face reddened in fury. "How dare you?" he spat. "I dare," Tonks seethed as she stood. "You need to get your head out of your ass if you expect us to stand a chance against him. The longer it takes for you to accept he is back, the more people will be needlessly murdered and their blood will be on your hands." Rufus released a deep breath and took a moment to compose himself. "I apologize for my comments. I made a judgment on someone I do not know. Forgive me, Aura Tonks. Things are becoming very difficult around here." Tonks nodded and waited for the man to continue, his sincerity not at all convincing. "It is a very hard thing to accept. You must understand the devastation that was caused during the last war. Were it not for him falling to the Potters, I doubt we would have won. I simply wish to speak to him as the new Minister of Magic and see if bridges cannot be built between us." Tonks shook her head. "It would do no good. Harry will not trust the Ministry after what Fudge did, and he wants no involvement with Wizarding Britain." "Surely you are still in touch?" Amelia interjected. "I haven't seen him since he returned home," Tonks replied, which was not a complete lie. He was living in Grimmauld Place and she had seen him last night before he went there. "Then we will put it on hold, but I will be watching you, Aura Tonks," Scrimger warned irritably. "If I get any indication that you have been dishonest or proved to be a liability, you will never put on that damned uniform again." "As you wish," Tonks answered. "Is there anything else?" You are dismissed, Amelia returned with a frown. She watched as the young aura exited, her own mind whirring with doubt, but none regarding the woman's ability to do her job. I don't like it, Bones. She's hiding something. So long as it doesn't impact us, what can we do? If it were anyone else, they would be out of here and you know it. You've either gone soft, or you are letting your personal feelings cloud your judgment. Amelia raised a delicate brow at the man. That young woman is the best to walk through that door in years. Moody sees potential in her, as do I, she replied. If she proves to be a danger to us, she will be dealt with. But as things stand, it is her caught in a difficult position. I will not lose her because of this, Rufus. She is one of the best we have, and will likely one day be sat in this very seat. Scrimgeour snorted. She's a stubborn, stupid girl. And who does she remind you of? Amelia growled. Rufus deflated. She's very much like you were, Bones. Amelia nodded. Not to be too immodest, but I think if we had more auras like myself, and you were, this wouldn't be so daunting. So you believe it too? Amelia nodded. The blacks are not ones to put themselves in the public eye for no reason. I've seen enough to believe Harry Black and will act accordingly until proven otherwise. Rufus released a deep breath, and conceded her point with a nod. Proceed as you see fit, Amelia. Whatever you need will be made available. Thank you. Outwardly Amelia Bones was as stoic as ever, her countenance belying the glee she felt within. Rufus had just given her exactly what she needed to bring the department up to par, though if time wasn't kind it may already be too late. Albus Dumbledore watched as the members of the Order talked amongst themselves, some bickering as they discussed the events that had been transpiring over the past days. Much had happened, and even the headmaster himself was at a loss of how things could change so dramatically. He knew Tom had taught the boy throughout his years at Hogwarts. He had proven to be as shrewd as his ancestor, as ambitious but always patient, waiting until a situation was heavily to his advantage before striking. What had occurred these few days went against this. He knew not if the man had become impatient, overly keen to re-establish the same hold he once had over Britain, or if something else entirely was afoot. Such risk was not Tom's practice. Albus had been certain they would have weeks if not months, at the very least, before the man made his presence known once again, not mere days after his only partially successful return. Something was not right, or something had changed in Tom for the worst. Dumbledore could always rely on Tom to be controlled in his dealings. It made him predictable to an extent, had been beneficial only to the Order for the most part. If Tom had indeed become so reckless, their struggles had only increased tenfold. He was pulled from his thoughts by the arrival of Kingsley and Alastor, neither looking happy and both tired. He stood to greet them, the pockets of conversation falling silent as he exchanged a few words with the men before taking his seat. It has been a very odd week, one where we have been clouded with uncertainty as to what has been happening. I do believe that Alastor, Kingsley and Severus will be able to clear away any doubts we have, Albus assured the gathered order. Alastor, if you wouldn't mind. Moody stood, leaning his weight against his staff. Fudge is gone, he began with a shrug. We've found more than enough evidence to see him in Azkaban for the rest of his days if we catch up to him. We found proof of bribery, misappropriation of funds and fraud. Scrimgeour is the interim minister and is likely to be voted in permanently. Many muttered their displeasure with how Fudge had acted during his time in office, many shaking their head in disbelief at his level of deceit. What about the Yaxley murder? Alpheus Doge interjected. Moody shook his head. As he released a deep breath. We've got nothing, he announced. No evidence, no suspects and no trace. The only thing we found was the dark mark above his house, and what remained of him. He shared a brief glance with Kingsley, who held his hands up, but nodded for him to continue. What is more pressing is that another body was found this evening. Alden McNair was murdered, tortured first and left under the dark mark. We are still investigating it, but I think whoever did Yaxley in did McNair too. A shocked silence fell over the room, and even Dumbledore was surprised by the revelation. Severus? He questioned. Snape had paled further than what his already sallow skin usually showed as he shook his head. The Dark Lord was furious about Yaxley and will be even more so about McNair. He was due to go to the continent and negotiate with the giants. He's not the most pleasant of men, but he has a way with creatures. You're certain he ordered neither of these murders? Severus nodded. If it was just Yaxley, perhaps, but not Walden. He was far too valuable to the Dark Lord to be disposed of in such a way, Severus assured him. Dumbledore sighed. Then it appears there is another seeking out the Death Eaters, he surmised. Good riddance to them, Moody growled. Might make people think twice about joining them. So, the Ministry has no idea who is attacking them? Molly Weasley questioned. No, Moody replied, causing Kingsley to scoff. You know my thoughts on this, Alastor, he muttered. What is it you think, Kingsley? Dumbledore pressed gently. The Blacks. Albus nodded. He had thought of them also, but had not wanted to consider the implications if they were involved. It would only complicate matters further. The Blacks could not be negotiated with, nor would they work with him and the Order. It was an additional thing he did not want to have to worry about. With no proof. How can you be so sure? He returned. I can't, Shacklebolt admitted. It is just a feeling. We can't arrest someone on a feeling, Moody pointed out. Or someone as protected as the Black family. Fudge saw to that. Arthur Weasley added. Dumbledore held up his hands to settle the three men. What of young Nymphadora? I understand she has returned to duty. She's not herself, Kingsley answered with a shake of his head. She's distanced herself and will only speak to us about work. Black must have told her we are part of the Order and she no longer trusts us. Dumbledore sighed disappointedly. She would have been a fantastic asset, he mused aloud. I fear it is something now beyond our control. If she feels we are against Harry, she will not side with us. Are we not against the Blacks if they are responsible? Sturgis Podmore questioned. Dumbledore shook his head as Moody snorted. If any of you feel up to crossing wands with the boy, then have at it, he growled amusedly. I saw the memory of what he did to the Dark Lord and his followers, and I certainly won't stand in his way if he has chosen to go against them. None of us will be the one to bring him down, I can promise you that. I dare say even Albus here would find him to be a challenge. He finished, jerking a gnarled thumb in the direction of the aged headmaster. So, we let him keep murdering people? Molly interjected disbelievingly. Death Eaters. Molly? Moody clarified with a grin, his scars stretching sinisterly across his features. Before Molly could offer a rebuttal, Dumbledore spoke. I believe we have discussed all we can for now, he announced. Severus, I believe the Dark Lord should hear of Walden's demise from yourself. Snape offered no reply other than a slight bow before exiting the room. The rest of you, continue as you are, and we will reconvene after young Charlie Potter has been buried. There is little else we can do until things begin to unfold. As I suspect, with a muttering of understanding and an exchange of farewells, the rest of the Order exited with only Moody and Kingsley remaining behind. We need to talk, Albus, the grizzled Auro stated. Dumbledore gestured for the man to speak his mind. I will not be returning to teach this year. My place is out there, dealing with the scum. Dumbledore sighed. I suspected that this would be the case. Alastor, he replied. For what it is worth, I want to thank you for spending this past year at the school. Your help has been invaluable to the students. Moody nodded his acceptance of the praise. Make sure you get someone worth a damn to replace me. The brats will need all the help they can get. Dumbledore's beard twitched with amusement. Alastor Moody was not a sentimental man, and this was as close as one would get to eliciting any semblance of outward care or fondness. I will be certain to, old friend. Moody again nodded, and took his leave, every other step clunking against the stone floor of the office. I don't suppose you are here to offer your services as our next defense against the dark arts, Professor Kingsley? Dumbledore asked, turning to the last remaining member of the Order. Unfortunately not, Kingsley confirmed. I simply wanted to reiterate my certainty that the Blacks are behind these killings. Dumbledore peered at the man over his half-moon spectacles appraisingly. Kingsley Shacklebolt had always been inquisitive as a student, exceedingly bright and gifted with practical magic more so. Being an Auro was as natural to the man as breathing. I understand your thoughts, Kingsley, however, What I am about to say to you is for your own good. Do not antagonize the blacks. It would do yourself nor our cause well. I know it is difficult to ignore your instincts, but it will only provoke an undesirable end. I truly wish I could say more, but Harry Black is perhaps the only one of us that can put an end to the Dark Lord. But you are old and not as capable as I once was, and no longer have the ability to defeat Voldemort. Dumbledore interrupted bluntly. In truth, he has always been beyond me. It is my experience that has ensured I survived each encounter with him. Kingsley looked towards the older man he held much respect for in disbelief. His sage reply unexpected. So, our only hope is a boy that we don't know will even fight for us. A boy that is likely behind the brutal murder of others. Dumbledore bowed his head. I understand your reservations, my friend. However, I believe that Harry Black will prove to be a better man than any gives him credit for. His methods are questionable at best, unsavory to people such as us, but can you deny that he will need this tenacity to be able to bring an end to the Dark Lord? Kingsley swallowed deeply before releasing a deep breath. I'm sorry, Albus. I just can't put as much faith in him as you do. Dumbledore nodded his understanding. I can assure you that if I believe it is needed, I will personally intervene and do my best to put a stop to what he is doing. As things are, as unpleasant as his actions are proving to be, it is only benefiting our cause. Kingsley nodded. I will take on board what you have said, Albus. But what about Tonks? Dumbledore sighed gently. Tell me, has Nymphadora ever proven to you to be a foolish girl? Kingsley frowned as he shook his head. She's one of the most intelligent people I know, he conceded. Then you should trust her, Kingsley. The only thing she is guilty of is falling in love, and that may well prove to be what will bring this conflict to a satisfactory end. Love? Kingsley questioned, causing Dumbledore to chuckle. To a young man such as yourself, it may seem trivial, but love is one of the most powerful magics of all. When you live as many years as I have, you begin to understand the strength such a thing can give you. Kingsley eyed the older man and found himself smirking. Dumbledore was a rather strange, eccentric man. There was, however, no denying his brilliance. He had proven to be one of the greatest wizards in recent times, perhaps ever, and Kingsley Shacklebolt, though skeptical, had no reason to begin doubting the man he had chosen to follow now. Arcturus Orion Black paused as he reached the gates to the estate, his mind still carrying the vestiges of doubt to what he was about to do. He had pondered his options carefully, pros and cons, and how such a decision could impact his family. He was anything if careful when it came to those of his blood. Thus, his decision had not been made lightly. Though it may be surprising even to himself, he could think of no better man than to take the mantle of Minister of Magic. He pushed open the gate and headed towards the front door. The lawns on either side of the path immaculate, and house as imposing as any that he himself owned. With a sharp series of taps from his knuckles, he waited to be bid to enter. Had he not pre-arranged the meeting, he certainly would not have made this far into the property uninhibited, and would likely be dead already. After a moment or so, the door opened and he was greeted by the lady of the house, who eyed him warily. Come in, Lord Black, she offered, satisfied that it was indeed him that had arrived at the abode. Arcturus merely nodded politely as he crossed the threshold, his eyes scanning the foyer expectantly. May I take your coat? My husband is in the dining room. Thank you, Arcturus returned as handed the garment to the woman. She hung it on a rack by the front door and gestured for him to follow. Entering the dining room, he was met with the sight of a large oak table, not dissimilar to the ones owned by the Black family, and the man he had come to visit waiting expectantly for his arrival. I can't say I wasn't surprised by your request to see me, the man greeted him. What can I do for you, Lord Black? Not one to waste time on the exchanging of pleasantries. Arcturus felt it prudent to get to the point, lest he were to hinder himself by falling into a conversation he did not want to have. I want you to be the Minister of Magic, he announced without preamble. James Potter looked at him, baffled, and eyes wide in surprise. I'm sorry. What? He stuttered. Don't act the bloody simpleton, Potter. I want you to be the next minister, Arcturus clarified. James frowned as he shook his head, processing the request that had been made of him. Why? He asked eventually. Because there is no one that wants Voldemort gone more than you. Because you are the only person I trust to do whatever you can to keep Harry safe, and because you are a damn sight better than any other option there is." James stared into his eyes, searching for any sincerity in the words spoken. "I'm not a politician. You're a Potter. Being a leader is in your blood. Your father would have been a fine minister, and I think you could be too." James released a deep breath. "Our reputation isn't exactly good," he pointed out. "If you are endorsed by the Blacks, I can make it happen. The Wizengamot would vote you in without too many issues. No one knows who they can trust right now, but none of them could doubt how much a Potter would want to put an end to him. Show that you have some balls about you and I will do the rest." "I'm an aura, I should be out there," James responded, pointing out of the window to his left. "Being minister doesn't mean you can't be. You'll be damn respected if you threw yourself into the thick of it." James sighed, unable to find any other counter. "You'd trust me in that position?" Arcturus shrugged. "I'd trust you to not be stupid enough to get in Harry's way." "Harry's?" Lily broke in. Arcturus's grin was feral. Was he turned to the woman? "Who do you think it is hunting down Voldemort's people?" "He got Yaxley and is going after McNair tonight," he explained. "He can't do that," Lily whispered. "Please, you have to stop him. I couldn't forgive myself if something happened to him." Arcturus shook his head. "I couldn't stop him if I wanted to. He cared for your boy, and he won't let any of the bastards off the hook. He made his decision and I support him. It is those he targets you should feel sorry for." Before Lily could speak, James placed a comforting hand on her forearm and squeezed gently. "I'll do it," he declared. "I'll put my name forward if it helps keep Harry safe." Arcturus nodded. "Good. Make sure you are at the meeting next week and I will arrange everything else." James stood and offered his hand to the older man. "I won't let Harry down, not again," he said sincerely. Arcturus gazed into the man's eyes and offered his own hand in return. "See that you don't, Potter. I will not have him harmed because of anything you do." James nodded sincerely, his wand snapping into his hand as a streak of blinding white light entered the room and coalesced into a large snake with 3 heads. "We need to talk at your earliest convenience." The voice of Harry sounded throughout the room, the 3 pairs of eyes firmly on James and Lily Potter. Arcturus frowned at the serpent as the husband and wife shared a look of shock. "I think he means now," he broke in. "Harry does not like to be kept waiting." James nodded as he fired off a Patronus of his own, his stag cantering through the wall and disappearing into the grounds. "Did you know about this?" Lily asked suspiciously. Arcturus shook his head. "I can assure you I had no idea. I will, however, be present. I'm very interested in what my heir wishes to discuss with you both so urgently." Harry sat at his desk, freshly showered. The death of Walden McNair had not been clean, far from it. McNair had suffered, more so than Yaxley, as was fitting to his crimes. The walls of his home were adorned with the many heads of creatures he had disposed of over the years, his mind awash with executions of those men, women and children alike. It was easy to see why he was held in such favor with the Dark Lord. His own proclivities were similar to those of Tom, and it felt only right he suffered the same end as most of his victims. Harry had enjoyed taking anything of worth from his mind, taking his vengeance in strips of flesh and eventually removing the man's head, placing it on a plaque waiting to be used above his own fireplace. He absent-mindedly picked up the stone he had retrieved from the gaunt shack, rolling it in his grip as he reaffirmed his reasons for doing what he was, the magic washing over him, eerily comforting. As it often did now, his mind wandered to thoughts of his brother. Would he hate him for what he did? Would he be disgusted? Or would he understand? "I don't know, Charlie," he sighed. "Maybe you were too sheltered to understand." "Well, I was more sheltered than you." A voice broke into his reverie, snapping Harry into action. In the blink of an eye he was on his feet, wand in hand and pointing to where the attrition had sounded. He could only gape at the visage of his brother, his skin and hair mottled with grey and the usual brown of his eyes, black, devoid of anything the boy represented. "See, Charlie," he gasped. The boy smiled at him, though it lacked any warmth. "Something like that," Charlie replied with a frown. "How did you get here?" Charlie shrugged. "You tell me, Harry. You summoned me." Harry loosened the grip he held on the stone and stared at it lying in his palm and then at his brother once more. Realizing what had happened, he crossed the distance between them and pulled the boy into his arms, shuddering at the cold of his touch. He held on for a moment before breaking away, his heart sinking as his thoughts cleared of the shock of the moment. "I'm still dead, Harry," Charlie clarified with a sad smile. "I'm here, but not really here. No magic can change that." Harry swallowed the lump that had formed in his throat, the lack of emotion in the words hurting and angering him equally. "Why did you do it, Charlie? Why did you have to get in the way of the curse?" Charlie shook his head and gave him a lopsided grin. "You mean the same way you did for me when I was a baby?" Harry narrowed his eyes at him. "That was different." "No, it wasn't," Charlie countered. "You took a killing curse for me and I took one for you. It just ended up being more permanent when I did it." He let out a sigh before continuing. "We are brothers, Harry. I couldn't watch you die in front of me. That may make me a coward, but I wouldn't change it. People need you more than they will ever need me, and you proved me right. Are you not planning on killing Voldemort?" "Don't say that," Harry almost pleaded. "I'm doing it because of what he did to you." Charlie scoffed. "You can keep telling yourself that, but we know it's more. You want him dead for what he did to you too. Everything bad that has happened to us all started with him." "I get it, Harry. If I had ever been capable, I would want to kill him too." Harry deflated, unwilling to argue with his brother on the matter. "Out of everything that ever happened to me, watching you die was the worst," he whispered. "Maybe a part of me wants him dead for what he did to me. It's what he did to you that has made want it all the more." Charlie offered him another smile as he took one of Harry's hands in his own, the cold exuding from the boy seeping into his skin. "You don't have to do this," he offered sincerely. "You can walk away as you plan to. I'd never hold it against you for choosing to live. It's what I would do." "Really?" Harry questioned skeptically. Charlie snorted as he shook his head. "I'd do everything I could to kill him if our positions were switched. The difference between us is that I would die in the attempt," he shrugged. "I'm neither as gifted nor as brave as you, Harry. It was my time to go and I died making sure my brother would live. I can't really ask for more than that." "I didn't want you to die," Harry replied. "No, but it happened. It's shit and I wish I was there, but I'm not." Harry released a deep breath as he stared at the boy for a few moments. "If you're here, there must be a way to bring you back." Charlie shook his head. "I can already feel myself fading. Whatever you did to bring me here, it didn't really bring me completely. Maybe I'm a ghost of sorts. Or maybe a bit more. I don't feel like me. There's so much missing and I'm cold. I don't belong here anymore." "Harry?" Harry swallowed as he nodded his understanding, but the boy in front of him was his brother in a way he had no doubt of that. "There must be something I can do," he tried. Charlie again shook his head. "There's only one thing I'd ask of you," he said warily. Harry frowned as he gestured for him to continue. "If you can, I want to speak to Mum and Dad one last time. I need them to understand." Harry hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I'll take you to them," he promised. "Thanks, Harry," Charlie replied. "For now you have to let me go. I don't know what this magic is, but it can't be good for you." "I don't think it is. I can feel it draining me," he admitted. "Idiot," Charlie chastised. "Let me go. We will see each other again soon when you take me home." Harry felt his eyes well with tears as he slowly released his hold on the stone. "I love you, Charlie." The smile that adorned his brother as he faded was all he could have hoped for, and he focused on it until not even a shadow of him remained. Pulling himself from his thoughts, he placed the stone on the desk and stared at it intently. Whatever magic was in that thing had proven to be as dangerous as it was incredible. Were he not so distracted by the time he had spent with his brother, he would have pondered it further. Instead, he reached into the top drawer of his desk and withdrew the letter that had accompanied the cloak gifted him from the Potters, and read the contents for the umpteenth time. "Dear Harry, I don't know where to begin with this letter. I could apologize profusely for what happened to you or could thank you for what you did for Charlie, but I'm afraid it would mean nothing to you. And rightly so. We never got the chance to talk. I hoped you would seek us out so that we had the chance to explain or even for you to berate us for our actions. Just anything. Am I a fool for hoping even more that you would maybe find even a little forgiveness for what we did? Perhaps, but call me a fool if you will. I never lost hope that my son would prove to be a better person than I, that my son would realize that no matter what had happened he was loved always by his mother and father. I could make excuse after excuse for what happened, but I will not insult you in that way. What we did was wrong and we put too much trust in another, something we should not have done. You should have been with us, we should have found a way. Even if it meant that we could never use or be around magic again, it would have been worth it. Not a day has passed that I have not looked at a photo of you as a babe and wished to turn back time, to hold you in my arms if only once more and tell you that you were loved, that I couldn't be any prouder that you are my son. I will never have the chance for the former, but I am as proud as can be of you, that you are my son and you are the man you have become. I still hope that one day you will come to us seeking answers, a hope that will never fade. Even if you cannot forgive our actions, even if it only gives you closure and you wish to see us no more, it would be more than I could ask of you. I love you, Harry James Potter. That has never changed, and I will always love you as any mother would her son. Lily Potter. Harry sighed as he placed the letter back in his drawer and sealed it with a locking charm. The words still meant little to him, and he wasn't sure if he could ever hold those that birthed him in any affection. He felt for them for the loss of his brother, but he couldn't be sure if what he felt was beyond that. With a shake of his head he fired off a Patronos. The hour was late, but there was no time like the present. In truth, he wasn't sure he'd be able to carry out his brother's wish if he were to sleep on it. Only a minute passed before a large stag appeared in the room, the voice of James Potter addressing him. "You're welcome to come now. The wards won't keep you out." He rose from his seat and pocketed the stone and cloak before checking he had his wand, just in case. Knowing he could no longer avoid meeting with them, he disapparated, his thoughts focused on the Potter home he had spent his first childhood years. Lord Voldemort looked upon the trembling heap that was Severus Snape, his temper having finally reached boiling point. Having heard the news of the latest act carried out against McNair was needed, and his loss would likely have repercussions on the outcome of his negotiations with giants. The man was an expert on the creatures, most creatures in fact. It had been he that had brought the Dementors on side during the last conflict. He that had secured the allegiance of the werewolves and would have been the one to add giants to his ranks. The Dark Lord took a moment to compose himself before rolling Snape onto his back with his foot. "You are certain Potter is behind this, Severus?" Snape nodded as he wheezed. "Shacklebolt is convinced, and Dumbledore too." Voldemort narrowed his eyes at the downed man. Severus was as dangerous as they came, a spy in his enemy ranks that could also be spying on him. Such an accomplished occlumens, that even his own prowess in the mind arts was unable to discern anything from him. He had, however, proven himself useful over the years. It was he that had brought the prophecy to his attention, and even helped him identify the potential children to which it pertained to. Yet none of what he had carried out in the Dark Lord's name made him any more trustworthy. Severus merely served himself under the guise of serving others. Should he prove problematic, he would be eliminated. The Dark Lord would seldom take such a chance on a man, if ever. Severus Snape, however, was a man of many talents and one he would use until such usefulness no longer benefited him. "Your arm, Severus," Voldemort instructed coolly. Snape hesitated for only the briefest of seconds before complying, wincing as a bony pale digit was pressed against his mark. "Potter has provoked me one too many times," the Dark Lord mused aloud. "We can no longer wait to liberate our brothers and sisters from their shackles." What concerned him more than ever was the state of those loyals still detained in Azkaban. Potter's friend was there, and it would only take a simple instruction for a significant blow to be landed against him. He had wished to wait a little longer, wished to consolidate his power so that those that once followed him would not waver if his position were weak. He could no longer afford such luxury. They had to be freed immediately. Standing in front of the home he spent his formative years, stirred conflicting thoughts, contrary to the image he had tainted of James and Lily Potter since he had been a young boy. In his own mind he had vilified those that had birthed him, had hated them for abandoning him when it was them he had needed the most, and the bitterness had festered, leaving him with a very uncomplimentary impression of his natural mother and father. He'd asked on many occasions why he had been shunned, why he'd had to endure the loneliness and outright abuse he had suffered at the hands of the Dursleys. No answer he had been given had been satisfactory. Sirius would adopt a countenance of guilt, and Harry would later feel the same as he pondered his circumstances. It had been Sirius and Cassie that had rescued him, and his grandfather that had opened his home, given him a family that had been taken from him. They had all saved him, had given their own blood so that he may live a semblance of life, none ever having asked anything in return. He had been young when that realization had set in, and he had not looked back since. He was a black by circumstance, by blood and by choice, and he had embraced it, lived by the ways of his family, and he had been deemed worthy of such a place by those that mattered to him. James and Lily Potter had become all but a distant memory, a presence in the back of his mind that he had not welcomed. Even now the bitterness was prevalent and would likely always be so, though it hadn't always been this way. He remembered vividly being bounced on the knee of a man who chuckled as Harry attempted to steal the glasses from upon his nose, and the joyous laughter of a woman who blew raspberries across his tummy as she attempted to wrest him from his clothing, none of which changed when his baby brother had been born. The laughter, the bouncing on the knee, and even kissing his scrapes after a fall was still there, even still when they had suddenly moved from this home into the smaller one at Godric's Hollow.